Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Cold Hard Sports Talk with your hosts, Matty B and Woodsy.
All right, our guest for today, a guy who is a scout in the USHL and also did color commentary with me with the Tisdale Trojans years ago. Fillmore's favorite son, Wayne Kosior, is our guest for today. And I say Fillmore's favorite son because I don't know anybody else from Fillmore, Saskatchewan. Wayne, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. I'm glad you did your research on me. I didn't know you knew I was from Fillmore and stuff.
I got a lot stocked in this brain. Is there anybody famous from Fillmore other than you?
Well, I'm not famous, but I'll tell you what, my buddy who regretfully passed away this past year, but he was the World Cup trap shooting champion, went to the Olympics in Atlanta. So he's from Fillmore, Saskatchewan. Regretfully, like I say, he had a heart attack in the past few months. We lost him, but we had a lot of good time, and he packed a lot of good life into those 69 years he had on this earth.
Oh, well, how about that? An Olympian from Fillmore. That's something to, that's for sure.
Exactly. And yeah, there's no sign or statue of me in Fillmore, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Wait, maybe eventually, right? Eventually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good things take time.
Yeah. Wayne, you are currently scouting in the USHL, but first off, before we get into how you became a scout, take us back to your hockey playing days, because obviously a guy doesn't not play hockey and then obviously become a scout at a high level. So tell us a little bit about your playing days in rural Saskatchewan.
Well, that's an interesting story, and I guess we'll get to the climax of that story. But yeah, I grew up in Fillmore, and like every kid, I grew up on the farm, played hockey from, I think I started in 6 and under or something like that, and I always played in Fillmore, and we would travel to the local towns around there. I mean, back in that day, every town had a hockey team. So, I mean, every 7-8 miles when they built the railway and the elevators, right, there was a town, and pretty much all those teams had towns. And so we, like, literally, if we went for a half-hour road trip, we thought like we were in the NHL, man. It was like a big road trip because we're going to Francis or Sedley or something like that. And so I played there through until I was 15 years old. Played all my minor hockey there. I was lucky enough to have a great coach that taught me a lot. His name was Gabe Keane. He happened to have one boy that was a year older than me and one boy that was a year younger than me. So he was always my coach because he was coaching his boys. And his boys went on to be great hockey players. Both played in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. I know Randy, the older boy, he actually had a brief stint with the New Westminster Bruins in the old Western Hockey League back in the big old tough days and stuff like that. And so I played there till 15, and then you guys might recall, or maybe you don't, way back, you probably weren't even born, you guys. So I got recruited to play with Weyburn, and it was the Midget A League. So there was no Midget Triple A League then, but it was the top midget circuit in Saskatchewan. So, the Regina Patsies and all those teams, Notre Dame Hounds were in that league. And the year previous to that, Weyburn hosted a Russian national team, and it was a midget team. And so they were touring Canada. And so the Weyburn Beavers, the team that recruited me, was the only team to beat that Russian team on this tour. And part of the draw for me to go to Weyburn was that, seeing as Weyburn, made quite a name for themselves by beating this Russian team, so there was lots of European teams that wanted to have us come over. So the talk was that we were going to be doing a tour of Europe and going over there and playing. And so that got me signing the dotted line, but the tour never ever happened. But had a great year there. We won the province. Got the opportunity to play under legendary coach Dwight McMillan. He was, I don't know, at one point he was the most games coached in junior A hockey, like over 1,000 or something like that. He's like just insane amount of games that he's coached and won, and incredible guy, old school guy, of course. There were some amazing stories that come out of that, but it was just incredible to play for him because it was one year when he wasn't coaching the Weyburn Red Wings is where he spent all his time. So through all that, I got called up one game for the Weyburn Red Wings when I was 16 years old. And of all the places, they're playing their rivals, Estevan, in the old Civic Auditorium. And it's nothing like the rink they have today. The Civic Auditorium back in the late 70s when I was playing was a hole. And it was unbelievably small. So mirrored, I guess, the same size as the Boston Garden. Extremely small ice surface. Of course, everybody's huge. And so I just felt like a pinball out there just bouncing off all these Bruins guys that everybody wanted to kill me and stuff because I was from Weyburn. And then interesting, my good buddy Randy Keene that I grew up with and played, he was on Estevan and stuff. So it gave us an opportunity. We met at center ice in the pregame warmups and chatted type thing. And it was a great thrill to play. But that was the highlight of my career, was playing one game in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. So when I was 17, I got a job at SaskTel after I went to Europe on a scholarship, and never looked back, and moved on to my professional career. I hated it for a lot of years. All my buddies were playing Junior A and WHL, having the time of their lives, drinking beer, chasing girls. And here I was slugging it out 8 to 5, but it paid off in the end, so happy that it worked out that way.
And so the Estevan old odd term, was that the barn with like the square corners and like all of that good stuff?
It was unreal. I think they just knocked it down a few years ago, because I know my son Landon even played in there in a tournament when he was about 10, and he's only 18 now. So probably in the last 6 or 7 years, they knocked it down. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, for a Junior A rink. And I remember as a kid going there back when, Estevan used to be in the old, what they call it, the Western Canada Hockey League.
Yeah.
And so Estevan had a team, and it was kind of back in those days, the teams were affiliated with, the pro teams. And so, guys that played there would go on to the Bruins and stuff like that. And it was incredible hockey. And I think one guy, Stan Smeal played there, went on to the Vancouver Canucks and stuff. And so, but yeah, it's a super small, just like the Boston Gardens is, the old Boston Gardens, which I never ever visited, but I heard it was just a nightmare to play in there and stuff. And I guess that's why the Bruins were the big bad Bruins, because they would just intimidate everybody in that small little arena.
And you mentioned you went pro, you went to your professional career. You didn't play hockey pro, but decided to collar. No. But then you got back into the high-end hockey, I guess, ranks. First, your son Landon was a high-end hockey player in his own right, but you started scouting. How did this come to be?
Well, like they say, it's like guys that are crappy hockey players and stuff like that got to find some way to make a living if you can't make it with hockey. So sometimes it's scouting, and sometimes, you guys too. Yeah. But I mean, even goalies, quite often goalies become coaches and scouts, some of the best. And it's sometimes because they're students of the game. And I think that's what maybe helped me. I think I was always a student of the game. I was trying to figure things out and always learn things from everybody. And so anyways, long story short, I started out actually with the Western League Hockey Prospects. So Tyler Neitz was the running that. And so he needed somebody just to, help rank the players in Saskatchewan. And so, that's probably, I've been in the the USHL for 6 years now. So a couple years previous, so probably 8 years ago or something, just dabbled in that. And then lo and behold, my son's agent out of North Dakota contacted me, and the Chicago Steel had contacted him, and they were looking for somebody to scout for them in Western Canada. So he passed along my name, and ended up having a call with Ryan Bennett, was the general manager at that time, and we had a chat and seemed to hit it off, and the rest is history. That was kind of my start with under Ryan Bennett as with the Chicago Steel.
So you have a ton of credit to give to Landon for landing you a job as a scout, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm famous because of my son. It's not because usually it's the other way around. You say, oh, my dad did this, my dad that. I'm famous because of him, what he's done. And he's only 18, so.
And Jake is also a goaltender. So you mentioned goalies, student of the game. Don't let his head get too big, because
there you go.
You're pumping his tires a bit here.
I should have known. Well, some people say goalies have, there's other characteristics about goalies, and I've heard words like flakes, different, weird, but
yep, accurate most of the time.
I don't know what it is, but it's so ironic that most goalies just seem to be different ducks. I don't know. Yeah, I guess if you want to stand in front of 100-mile-an-hour flying rubber at you, I guess you got to be a bit crazy.
Exactly. They get you at a young age too. You find an 8-year-old who's willing to dive in front of the pucks, then they're already on the wrong path.
Exactly. I guess that's it.
And when you started with the Chicago Steel, do you remember kind of like your first kind of scouting sort of experience with them, kind of what it was like to sort of start being an actual scout?
Well, it was like drinking from a fire hose, really. I mean, because it's completely, well, I shouldn't say completely, but it's very, very different from the Western Hockey League. There's all different rules. There's different drafts. There's different imports, right? So Canadian guys that I'm scouting, I mean, you're an import, so they're limited to, today it's maximum 6 imports, of which 4 have to be Canadians, 2 can be Euros. So you're looking at, that type of thing. And so, Ryan Bennett was, I learned a lot from him. He's a great guy. I mean, just super, he's young. I think Benny back in that time was about 30 years old. And so he kind of really rose through the ranks. He was played for the University of Nebraska, Omaha in college, was a pretty big time player there. And, so I just learned a lot from Benny. And he just has this incredible memory that just astounds me that, I mean, he can talk about, some bantam player and wherever that he's seen, 2 years ago and remember this guy. And I mean, just recently I talked to Ryan Bennett, who, he moved on. I mean, from when he hired me in Chicago, we spent a couple, maybe 2 to 3 years there. Then he moved on to Muskegon Lumberjacks in the United States Hockey League and was their GM for a couple of years. And through that time, me and Benny put together a team to go down to Boston to the Chowder Cup. And so we did that. I co-coached with the guy there that went to Boston College. We had a great time. So I took Landon down there. And ironically, one of the kids that went down with us was Jordan Edwards. And Jordan Edwards was a Saskatoon kid, played for the Saskatoon Blazers. Great player. He's 6'3", 185 pounds, plays a tough game. And he's playing with Drumheller now in the AJ. And so Jordan came down, his family, younger brother Matty, who's now kind of an up-and-coming star, and played that, week-long tournament or whatever. And so just recently I was just talking to Benny about some stuff, and I mentioned Jordan. He goes, "Oh, yeah, that's that kid that played with us in Boston and stuff, right?" And that was like 3-4 years ago, and it was a one-time thing, but he still remembers the kid. It just fascinates me, how he can remember stuff. But that's a big part, I think, of being a good scout. It's just having that memory of, you can see a kid, still remember all about him, 6 months later, be able to compare him in your mind to a player you're looking at today. And so, I give Ryan Bennett a lot of credit for my development and stuff, and learned a lot of things through him. We traveled to a number of tournaments in the U.S. and stuff together. So to pick up things from him and that, and of course have some beers. He always roomed me with Neil Hall is our Boston scout. And so me and Neil work today together still because he's with the Des Moines Buccaneers as I am today. So we still chat all the time, but me and old Neil like to have a couple beers, and certainly Benny does too. So there'd be many late nights that after, camps would wrap up 10, 11 o'clock at night, we go grab some dinner, have a few beers, and invariably we'd end up back at the room, 2, 3 in the morning, still chewing the fat and telling some stories and having beers. So some good old times.
That's like one of the great things about, hockey and just all of that in general, right? Is the extra stuff off the ice and, shooting the shit with, your coworkers, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they all got interesting stories because, they played hockey themselves. And so, lived a full life just in their hockey world. And of course, they're very well connected. I mean, when you're a USHL GM, I mean, all the NHL GMs and stuff like that. And, scouting in Chicago. I mean, Chicago is a very well-known franchise. And, Larry Robbins, our owner's a big name on Wall Street and stuff like that. So, you can read about him in Forbes magazine and stuff like that. He's a pretty famous guy. And just to be associated with all those guys and get to know those guys and stuff was just incredible.
And that's one of those things too with hockey, right? Where it's like, I can go get a job at Staples and, I'll work there. It doesn't, guarantee that the people I work with, I'm going to have that kind of chemistry with. But you take any people from the hockey world together, you have them work together, they're going to all get along. They're going to have stories to tell. They're all going to want to have a few beers together. Doesn't matter where you're from, how you came up. You put a bunch of hockey boys together and they'll have a good time.
You're bang on there with that, Jake. I mean, we all have something in common when we're hockey guys. And, I've heard it from a few people, hockey guys seem to be just down to earth people. I mean, I guess you compare it to the big basketball guys or the big football guys in the NFL and, doing all these crazy things and all the jewelry and, whatever, big cars. And I mean, sure. But it just seems like hockey guys, most of them grow up in small towns for the most part, a community of very humble families type thing. And so, I find it don't change. And I mean, through this work, I've been given the opportunity to talk to a lot of big name people in the NHL and stuff. And these guys are just like, they're just you and me. It's incredible how, friendly they are, and it's happy to help you out. And it's just incredible.
You mentioned you were with the Des Moines Buccaneers now as well. How did you manage to, I guess, switch lanes and join that team as well?
Well, it kind of came, there was a change in the GM in Chicago and stuff. And it was at the time that Landon was, trying to decide between playing the United States Hockey League or go to the Western Hockey League. He was being courted by both. At the time, Landon, he'd been drafted by the Omaha Lancers, and they held his rights. And we've been down to camp a couple of times there. And then obviously the PA Raiders had listed him, and they had his rights there. So Curtis Hunt was talking to us pretty regularly and pushing us to sign. And we declined to 1 year because Landon was just too young. He was going to go to Tisdale because he committed to Daryl Mann and the Trojans for the Telus Cup run, and that turned out to be a fantastic decision. And lo and behold, Chicago made a trade to acquire Landon, near the kind of the deadline, and they'd guaranteed Landon a spot on the roster too in Chicago, which is very enticing opportunity too. But in the meantime, Landon had gone up to PA and met Mark Habscheid and all the players, practiced with him a couple of times, and he just loved it up there. And he just said, I want to go play with the Raiders. And I had to question him at the time, right? It's because I'd been to Chicago, right? I mean, I know the high life you can live there, and the top team in the league perennially and stuff like that. And I mean, not that the Raiders are not the same, but I mean, it's older rink. But he said, hey, I just love it. The guys are great, the coach is great, the fans are incredible type thing. So that's why I want to play. So that's where he ended up going. And, he appeared briefly on the Steel roster. He was on the protected list and stuff like that. And when Landon decided to go the other route, we just decided to part ways. And I moved over to Des Moines Buccaneers, where a good buddy of mine, Peterman, who was the assistant coach previously in Chicago before he moved on to the NCAA, was coaching there. And so he brought both me and Neil over there. And so I've been there a couple of years and absolutely loving it there.
So throughout your 6 years, is there maybe a couple guys that stood out to you that you had scouted, because you were kind of had scouted all over kind of the prairies in Canada? Is there any guys that stood out to you, or any guy that you're even proud of that the team took because you said to take him?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this too, because this was something I was thinking, like even like a kid who like was kind of like an under the radar kid who you just had like a feeling about, who ended up turning out.
Yeah, I don't think any of the under the radar guys, because it's with the way that the USHL works, and where you can only carry in essence 4 Canadians. They got to be very elite type thing, and so typically in the USHL they have 2 different drafts. There's phase 1 and phase 2, and they're held on different days. Phase 1 would be like the WHL draft. It's the the younger kids, and the WHL they draft 14-year-olds, but the USHL it's 15-year-olds. So that's the first day you draft the 15-year-olds. So very rarely do you take Canadians. I mean, the elite ones do. Every team maybe takes 1 high-end Canadian. And usually that kid's been identified way in advance by somebody, and, he's locked in. And so I've never really had any opportunity to play a role in there, but I'm hoping this year we get a couple on the radar. But more so the phase 2 is where I play. And phase 2 is any player that's a free agent. So that's where I'm watching the 17, 18, 19-year-old players that are playing in the junior leagues across Western Canada. So by that time, most of the players are kind of, they've kind of, built their resumes up. They're pretty good players. And, to get a shot at a USHL team, you got to be a pretty dominant junior A player for the most part. So, just some names that come to mind. There's James McIsaac, I got out of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, that went on and played. Levi Klebor out of Warman, played with North Battleford North Stars, then went on down to Chicago, Sioux City, ended up playing with Minot, then went on to Maine University, did 1 there. Luke Reed, also out of Warman, interestingly enough, played in Chicago the last couple of years. Now he's moved on. He was committed to the University of North Dakota, but has moved on to, I think it's Vermont or New Hampshire, one of those universities up there in the Northeast area. And Scout Truman was another kid that we drafted last year out of the AG, out of Drumheller, that's done really well for Des Moines and stuff. So seems like every year I've been able to find at least 1 player that's made our squad, which is, that's really, what I want to achieve, is find a player that's going to play with us. And, all of us scouts have those horror stories where, you got 10 scouts in the room, everybody's got their list. And I mean, everybody wants like 5, 10 of their guys on the team. Well, do the math. That's not going to work. So at the end of the day, we're all pissed that we don't get our guys on the team, and we're mad. Why didn't we take this guy? But, the reality is there's only so many people that come on board, and, ultimately the GM's got to make the call. And I mean, ultimately we should feel lucky to get one of our players picked and that makes the team. So.
And
now
Yeah.
on the reverse of that, you don't need to drop any names. Do you have any like kind of horror stories of like a kid you're really vouching for who just didn't pan out when like, they did it at the last level and they just couldn't get it done here?
I can't think of anybody, Jake, that that have come across. I mean, we do a pretty good job vetting them. I mean, we've all heard those stories where, somebody turns out to be a disaster type thing, and whether that be, typically it's off ice activities that get kids into trouble and type like that. So, I've heard those stories, but I don't think there's been any player that, luckily that I've, vouched for and brought on board that has done that. And again, I think a lot of that is we do a lot of vetting, both, what they're like on and off the ice type thing and their character before we do select them. And certainly in order to make the team, you have to be that kind of a guy. So sorry, no stories on that side of things.
Wayne, you and I have kind of talked about this before. You've gotten to travel to some pretty interesting places for your scouting journeys. Where have you been able to go? Like, there's been some crazy places, eh?
Yeah, well, I mean, through the U.S., been in a number of places, obviously in Chicago and Boston, the big Chowder Cup tournaments down there, Minnesota, where all the big hockey stuff is. But, the big one that probably you're citing is the opportunity to go to Moscow in Russia.
Yeah.
And so I went there in 2019 and was supposed to be there last year, but COVID canceled that. And I was supposed to be there this year, just like last week they had the camp in Moscow. And so I was supposed to be there. But, I was able to join them via technology this year. I did a presentation of about 10 minutes that they played to the kids and stuff. And Andrei Matviev, the KHL agent that brings me over there, was kind enough to get pictures. So he showed all the kids in the audience and showed me up on the screen type thing and stuff. So kind of cool that we're still able to get to participate from far. But, hopefully I'll be there next year when things straighten out. Andrei said he definitely wants me back there. And just had an incredible time when I was in Moscow. Met a lot of European coaches that were there as part of the camp too, and definitely had a few beers and definitely a few shots of straight vodka, which is the custom over there, that's for sure.
So how's your Russian?
Yet no. I picked up a few terms when I was there, but I lost everything that I had. I tried to get a few phrases. I kind of practiced up, got some coaching from Andre, the guy that brought me over. But way too many beers, way too many vodkas while I was there. It was just really, really good time. And it's just, everything you say about the Russians and the Europeans is true. And I guess you get a bunch of hockey guys. I try to think of the group that was there. A lot of them I still stay in close contact with. Tomas Kapusta is a famous Czech player that played on their Olympic team and their national team. Was one of the first Czech players to actually defect from, when they were a communist nation back in, I think, 86. He was drafted by the Oilers, played a lot of years minor pro and stuff, never played with the Oilers in the end. But, he's a guy that brought me on as the Canadian director of scouting for the San Diego Sabres, a team that he owns in the USPHL. And so we stay in contact, and we're talking a couple of times a day as we're working through getting ready for the season for San Diego and stuff. So that was one gentleman. And then, there was a goalie coach from Sweden, Torleif, great guy, a couple of guys in the French Div 1 league that were there, guy out of Denmark. And so we'd get together every night, lots of Belarusians. And I'll never forget the first night that we got in, I got shacked up and rooming with the Swedish guy who just happened to like beers just like me. And we met the two French guys for lunch because we had a couple of days to tour Moscow before we started the camp. And Torleif, after we checked into our hotel, said, we're going to go meet the French guys and have a couple beers and lunch. And of course, we go have some beers. And then we're doing shots of vodka because we're in Russia and, have lunch. And that continues on till later in the afternoon. And one of the French coaches, his wife is Russian. And so her sister and one of her friends is going to come pick us guys up and take us out to like some of the sites like Gorky Park. It's just an unbelievable part of Moscow. And there was an old car factory that's been turned into like a really high-end like restaurants and bars, and it's kind of like you go into like a food court almost, but they're bars and food places, and so you just kind of go grab beer from here or some food from there, and so and it was very high end. It was the Moscow elite. There was nothing but Mercedes out front and stuff like that, and so I had a few more pops there, and then eventually the girls said that we're going to go to a nightclub or something like that, and so I mean this is about midnight or something, and we're going to hit a nightclub. So we've been going at it for 12 hours already, and we had to be on the ice the next evening, so we had to travel a bit. So we had to be a noontime check-in on the next Sunday the next day. And so lo and behold, we ended up in this nightclub in Moscow somewhere. I have no idea where we were because they were driving and stuff. And then the French guys, they're the bad guys. I mean, then they got into the Jägermeisters, and they literally just bring in tray after tray of Jägermeisters, which I hate. And you're drinking those, and then there'd be straight shots of vodka and get the odd beer in there. So finally, me and Torlev, about 2 a.m, he says, "We got to get out of here. And I go, "I'm all for that. I'm tired, man." So we go out and shag a cab in front of this nightclub and jump in. The cab goes, "Where can I take you guys?" And me and Torlev looked at each other. Neither of us had any idea where our hotel was because we just went out for lunch and then ended up touring half of Moscow with those people. We had no idea where we were. But thank God I had a business card in my wallet for the hotel. There was some obscure hotel. And Torlev just was like almost hugging me. He goes, "You saved my life. You saved my life." He goes, "We're in a city of 20 million people. And like, we're going to tell a taxi, yeah, it's like a little white hotel in Moscow here somewhere." So we got home, and the story doesn't end there. Sorry for talking so long about this, but this is a classic story.
Please keep going.
We're kind of in a small hotel motel in Moscow. A lot of the hotels are that way. They're very small, like maybe you have 10 rooms. And the tradition is there, you don't get a key. Like, we're usually, you get like a programmed plastic card. Well, there's still the old key, and you always have to get the attendant at the front to let you in your room. You never ever have a key for your room. So the attendant always lets you in. So, we stagger in this is probably about 3 a.m. now. And so we have to ring the bell, get this little old lady up. And so she comes out, and as we're sitting there waiting to get her to open our door, we hear this thump, 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 thump. We look, "What's that?" She goes, "There's an underground bar underneath the hotel here and stuff." Really? And so we said, "How do you get in there?" And she goes, "Well, you just go inside, and there's like a trap door type thing. You go down these stairs, like literally into a cellar, like it's a little cubby hole. And there's like music, like a DJ pumping there and stuff. There's maybe like 10 people in there. But we went down there, and lo and behold, there was 2 other guys that were there for the camp from Minnesota. And so we ended up having beer. So we didn't get home till like 5 a.m. And we had to be up and at Andre's place by noon. So very, very little sleep. And but what an incredible night. We had so much fun, so many laughs and stuff. But man, was I tired the next day.
Oh man, I love that story so much. You've told me that story before, and that is one of my favorite stories I've ever heard.
Classic.
That is like, if you expect Russia, that's probably what it would be, right? Like that's probably exactly what Russia, right?
Yeah, it was incredible. And the other story that comes to mind, that I don't know if I shared this with you, Matt, but for Jake's sake and your listeners type thing, is so we'd be running sessions, and we'd be there all day at the rink. And it was actually about 90 minutes, 2 hours outside of Moscow, called Dimitrov. And so it's a beautiful arena. They got a Russian junior team type thing. They call it the MHL. And so we do a session and then come into the coach's room, and they sometimes have snacks there. And one day Andre brings in the snacks, and what it is, it's like raw bacon. So they cut like raw bacon, and then they had caviar, of course, when that, just like sturgeon fish eggs. So these orange fish eggs and raw bacon and bread. And I just couldn't force myself to. I said, "I'm in Russia, I could try it." I couldn't. And one of the Minnesota guys tried it, and he almost threw up. Like he said, he's going to be physically sick. But these Russian guys, man, they're just like chowing down on this caviar and raw bacon and stuff like it's, going to go out of style type thing. And so that was certainly one funny story. And then the other funny story, I think, is, I grew up on the farm in Saskatchewan. So, back in the day in the farm, we always drank instant coffee and stuff. So in Russia, that's kind of what you drink too. And so you know, initially they like have a pot that's boiling on water and then, you know, a little jar of coffee type thing. And it was kind of off to the side. And one of the guys from Minnesota says, how'd you get the coffee? And I go, it's right over here. He's looking, he goes, what's that? I mean, how do you make it? He'd never seen instant coffee before in his life. So I had to make him an instant coffee because he'd never seen it before in his life. So that was pretty funny. To just shows you different parts of the world that don't experience certain things and stuff. But thank God I grew up on the farm and knew how to get myself some instant coffee.
Was it like good instant coffee at least?
Nah, I
No?
would say Russia's not known for its coffee. I mean, you don't want to go there and get a deluxe coffee, I don't think. Although I did go to a Starbucks at one in Moscow. The first day I was there, when I got up in the morning, I went walking downtown around Red Square and stuff, and there was a Starbucks there, and I go, this is going to be interesting for me to try and order something in here, but at least the attendant could actually speak a little English, so I was able to order a coffee, and it was incredible. I mean, I didn't know what I was ordering and stuff, but it was just like phenomenal. So they do have good coffee. I shouldn't say it's not good coffee there at all, but just certainly in the hockey rink, we didn't have good coffee.
Oh man, were there any players that you brought back over? Like, did you pick out a player that came back and ended up playing for your respective team?
No, there's numerous ones that I still keep in touch and helping a lot of these kids. A lot of these kids are young, and so, but the only guy I can think of, one guy's actually rated. I think he's rated a first round in the NHL draft this year, which I think is a bit high, but Gleb Ivanov. And so Gleb is 2003, small kid. I mean, back then he was like super small, and it was everybody up to 1999 players. So this little Gleb Ivanov was incredible, and just skate around, whip around, all that stuff. So he did end up coming over to the U.S. And so when I was with the Steel, he'd contact me and want me to help him kind of, get arrangements type thing to go to the camp and everything, and, help him get to the hotel. So kind of worked through that. And he ended up playing in 1 year in Sioux Falls. And then the next year he played in Des Moines in their AAA team this past year. So Ryan Bennett actually owns the Des Moines Buccaneers AAA program. And so that's where Gleb played this past year. But he's playing in the U18 with Team Russia. He's a smaller defensive, offensive-minded defenseman. So, that's one kid. And, to this day, I talked to a number of players that are coming over, and I'm hopeful to get a couple players to San Diego coming up this season that I'd seen in Russia. So they're just kind of coming of age. And, another kid I kind of helped out is Fedor Tobacco. The kid was incredible. So Fedor is a 2004. He's played the last 2 years out on the East Coast in the U.S. in prep hockey. And when we seen him, he would be, so 2004 and 19, so like 14 years old or something like that. And he was 6'4" and like 180 pounds or something, like just massive. And I met the kid and talked to his parents, very nice parents. This kid has hands the size of frying pans at 14. It was incredible. And so I watched him a bit online. He's still pretty good. I don't think he's kind of developed as much as we thought, but I still think he can be a big time goaltender. And so, he's a guy that I'd like to see, get into the North American League this year, or maybe even to the USHL, or, he's also considering the Canadian Hockey League type thing. So, there's a couple of the guys that, involved with and helping get to the US. And, I continued to talk to a number of them, and I got numerous parents that reach out to me. And of course, the couple of agents that I know there, mostly being Andrei Matviev, contacts me quite regularly about players and stuff. And, through that's led to, a number of European agents now that keep in contact with me, and they're either, giving me players that they think are legit and, should get some opportunity, or vice versa. They also are interested in, players for Europe. And the good part I like about that, and I tell my son Landon, I said, who knows where your career goes? Maybe someday you want to go to Europe. And, certainly I know a lot of good connections over there that, sometimes it's not going to get you the job, but it'll get you in the door, and you can go there and prove yourself. You could probably play in Europe someday.
Yeah, now he will have to give you credit for playing, right? It's going to switch, right? It's going to swap.
Exactly. If he's getting a paycheck, he can buy me that, Swedish beer or German beer, wherever he's playing, because he'll have a paycheck. And speaking of that, you told me that we were going to have a beer.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Like I was sitting here, so how about we pop one, a little cheers here, and do a virtual toast, eh?
Yeah. I thought you had cracked it already, so I was a little concerned. But
no, I didn't want to be the first one, but I've been talking so much, I'm getting thirsty, you know. It's just like when we do those radio broadcasts, Maddie.
I know.
Like after a while, I mean, I need a beer, but we can't drink beer in the stands. That wouldn't be too good.
Well, could you imagine if when you and I were doing Trojans games, if we had a beer with us, that probably wouldn't end very well.
Yeah, that's probably, I mean, I think you'd be unemployed for sure.
Probably.
You know, I'm just a freelancer. I probably get thrown out of the drink, but you'd be unemployed. So
exactly.
Yeah. Those are some good old days back in those days.
Well, I ask you this. Have you ever done color since you've joined me on the broadcasts? Because let's get real. People listened for you as opposed to me.
Yeah, I don't think so, Matt. But yeah, those were great broadcasts. And I mean, you know, the Trojans have such a following with, you know, the rabid fans that they have. And of course, all the parents and families are going to listen in. So, you know, I think you not me, you drew quite an audience and stuff. And of course, you know, that's great fun, but I don't think I've done the color.
No.
But as you well know, I kind of was involved in starting those Facebook broadcasts. I guess that's how I got into my little bit of my broadcasting career and getting the opportunity to work with you, legends like yourself.
Well, your broadcasting career has also developed a little bit. You're now a recurring guest on Amateur Sports TV. How did you manage to stumble onto that?
Well, I mean, that probably almost goes back to the Trojan days and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. You know, I never really thought about that, but the owner of Amateur Sports TV had contacted me because he'd seen the Trojans games I was doing, and he knew that the Trojans were hosting the TELUS Cup Western Regionals in 2019, I guess that'd be. And so he wanted to broadcast the games on his network, and he kind of had a pretty deluxe setup. And I think he'd been trying to pitch the executive, but wasn't making any headway and stuff. So I'd reached out to me. And I mean, he was talking about they bring in 7 cameras type thing, and it's mostly iPhones type thing that they use as cameras. But you know, there's different angles that they can switch to different views and stuff like that. And they do, you know, intermission interviews and stuff like that. So it sounded pretty incredible. So I got to know Glenn then. And then just recently, I guess, you know, a month or two ago, he had reached out and said something about wanting to do some junior hockey shows and would I be interested in stuff, and said, yeah, sure. So I kind of just started that it was just going to be something, you know, maybe guest a couple of times, but it's turned into a full-time gig, which is good. And I mean, I'm enjoying it. It's certainly sounds like they've been getting some good feedback on it. And it's certainly, you know, you realize the power of social media and stuff, as you guys well know, that, I mean, the world is at your reach when you're online. And, you know, just one story I have to share. I mean, it blows my mind that, you know, I did it's called Wayne's World on their on the ice section. It's a half-hour show every week, and I get 15 minutes of that myself and Theo talk. And I got a message on LinkedIn from a gentleman by the name of Nevin Marquardt. I'm not sure if either you know Nevin. Nevin would be a couple years younger than me. I think he's a 63 born, 63 or 64. So it was a big star with the Regina Pats back in the day. Went on to play, I think, 9 or 10 years with the Boston Bruins. Was legendary. And but better yet, when he retired, he kind of blew out his shoulder, had to retire a little bit sooner than normal, but went onto Wall Street to make a fortune on Wall Street. And, you know, I have no idea what Nevin's worth. I mean, he wouldn't probably ever tell me, but he's worth millions and millions is all I'll say. And he reached out to me, said he'd seen my show and he was impressed and wanted to chat to me. He said, when can we chat? And so it happened, I think it was like a Saturday morning or something. I said, you know, I'm here right now if you want to chat, or maybe, you know, tonight, whatever. He says, I'll call you right now. So here's me and Nevin Marquardt. We chatted for like an hour. And, you know, I'm thinking this big NHL guy, this guy that's from these big high-tech companies and stuff. And, you know, he was most interested in talking to me about me. I mean, that's what I found with a lot of these big NHL people that I met, and I've had the fortune to meet, you know, some pretty big names. They want to talk about you. I mean, and I guess maybe they get tired of talking about themselves. They want to find about your background and, you know, what makes you tick, what do you like and stuff. And so that's kind of how Nevin's conversation went. And, you know, at the end of the day, it sounds like he's got some businesses that he might want to talk to me about, getting me involved and stuff. So without that show, I mean, how would I ever met Nevin Marquardt? So he's coming into Regina. It looks like, you know, he said he owned a house in Boston still, and he's living in Vegas right now, but he's looking to come up and buy a house in Regina, maybe because his parents are still here and wants to spend some time here. So we're going to try to get together here in about a month or so. He thought he'd be up. So kind of an ironic story that dovetailed onto your story about me doing this Wayne's World segment. It's just crazy how it goes. And here I am now, and, you know, the cold hard sports or whatever.
Hey, is there any have you received any, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Copyright with the Wayne's World thing? Because
Well, I haven't had anybody knock down my door or threaten to sue me or anything like that, but I'm sure it'll happen soon enough.
Okay.
I know the guys on Amateur Sports TV had said that, sometimes I think they were using some kind of music that was copyrighted. They didn't have the rights to that, then they get the slap on the fingers that they can't use that. So I've noticed the odd time there's different music when we do our thing. So I'm thinking, oh, well, they must have got busted on that last song or something.
See, we don't use any music, right? We're just bare bones. See, that's how we don't get any of that.
We have our one intro song that
Yes.
we paid to get made. That's a custom song.
Okay.
That's an original.
Pricey,
you
right?
gotta have music. It's like a pregame warm up. You gotta have some tunes that kind of gets people pumped up and stuff like that. So, maybe you guys have to write your own music or something.
Exactly. We'll get Maddie B to do the vocals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess, Jake, do you have any other questions for Wayne?
Well, I'd like to ask with Maddie B and I, we're both kind of aspiring coaches in our own way. We're both involved in the coaching game, the minor level. Any scouting tips you can give us? Like, what do you watch for? If like you only have a couple of skates to watch a player, what are the big things you watch for? Like, maybe it could be a tip for us as coaches running evaluations, looking for the right player to add to our clubs.
Yeah, well, what you always look for me, number one, is skating's got to be good, of course. As you're going up the ranks, you got to be a good skater and stuff. And probably second behind skating would be IQ. Is how do they think the game and stuff? Are they using the players around them to make themselves better, or are they a puck hog and stuff? But usually IQ is something that's really jumps out at me right after the skating type thing. And the next thing would be is how are they in the small ice areas? That's where you can really tell good hockey players from average hockey players if they get into tight traffic and they can do things with the puck, like keep it on their stick or, make a good pass type thing while they're in that traffic and stuff. That's usually, some pretty good indicators of good hockey players. So those are the things that jump out at me right away. And, the other thing I always like to throw in, and because, I'll share a story about Mike Babcock in a second, but, I talked to Mike recently and, we kind of talked that we're both old school guys and the fact that, we need to see the players. So this year with COVID and stuff, we haven't been able to go to live games. So, you don't get to see the things, the player, how they act, on the bench or away from the play type thing. And so you can tell a lot about players and typically sometimes it can be negative stuff if they're a bad teammate or, they're screaming at their teammates, blaming them for stuff. Those are things you don't really want. And so to be live and see those things is, things that are important to me, which we've kind of missed by just being able to scout on video this year.
Yeah.
So that leads me into the Mike Babcock story.
Yes,
so
yes.
Let's get into that.
I'd like to tell my friends that I'm the only guy that screened Mike Babcock's call. So, so recently, and it kind of, you need some background in the story, is I was helping a player that was playing NCAA and he got put on what you call the transfer portal. So this year, and that's big time because, with the 5th year of eligibility, there's so many excess college players now. So there's 255 players, I think, got thrown onto the transfer portal. So that means they're looking for new homes and stuff. And sometimes the players chose that. Sometimes the team chose that, whatever way those players are there looking for new teams. And so I was helping this one player find a spot. And, I thought one place, maybe U of S, because Babcock was coming back. And I'd recently met with Brent McEwen. He was the longtime coach for the U of S, I think for about 15 years. And then he went on to be a scout for the LA Kings for 16 years. So we had a coffee here a couple months ago in Saskatoon, and he was just retiring from the LA Kings. And of course, we're talking about the old U of S days, and Dave Adolph, he was coaching there now. He took over from Brent McEwen. And so Adolph, I think, had been there almost 30 years now. So you think about that. Adolph been there almost 30 years, and then McEwen been there 15 years. So there's only been 2 coaches in the last 30, 40 years for the U of S Huskies. And so when I wanted to, obviously I don't have Mike Babcock's phone number. I'm not going to call Mike Babcock as a rule anyways, even if I did have his number. So I just reached out to Brent and said, maybe could he touch base with Dave Adolph about this player? And so he said, yeah, for sure. I'll get Dave to talk to Mike or whatever. And Dave Adolph got right back to me and said, yeah, I talked to Babcock. He's going to think about it. He's probably going to give you a call. Okay, whatever. And so I work a part-time job at Sport Check. I just do 2 half-day shifts a week just to keep myself active out in public and, socializing and stuff. And I'm at work, and of course I can't answer a phone call and work, and when they're working, of course, I still look at my phone. I'm looking Michigan number, and of course I'm thinking it's just some telemarketer or something like that call me, which is all these scams and stuff or whatever. Let it go. I get off of work at, I think it's 3:00 when I got off that day of the shift, and go to my vehicle, say, I should check my voicemails, and here's Mike Babcock. So I tell people, I screened Mike Babcock's call. I mean, how inconsiderate that he calls me when I'm not available or he can't take a call. So anyways, I mean, Mike left a message and, he just said, hey, I think at the time he said he was going on had to do a TV interview, and then he's going to fly back to the West Coast tonight. So we try and connect the next day. So we proceeded to play phone tag for a few days because, I mean, I'm hard to get a hold of. Can you imagine how hard it is to get a hold of Mike Babcock? I'm never going to catch him. But, he never wanted to set a time. So we, played the phone tag for a bit. And then the one day I finally was at Kenosee. I went down, my brother lives down at Kenosee Lake, and they're famous for their good golf course there. But, this would be probably in March. So, I mean, I think the snow had just left. And so just before I left, I phoned Mike, of course, got his voicemail, and I said, Mike, I'm going to be in my car for like the next 90 minutes, 2 hours. So you can catch me if you call me then. And hang up. And so sure enough, 20 minutes into my drive, phone rings and it's Mike Babcock. And the funniest thing, he doesn't say hello or anything. He says, Kenosee, huh? You're golfing, aren't you? Mike's a big time golfer and stuff. And, he likes to come back to Saskatchewan. So got his cottage in Saskatchewan. He likes to golf and stuff. So, I had to proceed to tell him that I was in there golfing, just visiting family and stuff. It's too cold here. And of course, he proceeded to rub it in that he said, well, I'm in Palm Springs, he goes now, so I'm going to go golfing. And so we had a great chat. And I mean, you've probably heard from a lot of people, Mike's a great guy. And again, to my earlier point, he wanted to talk about me, not about him. He's asking about my family and this and that. And then we get talking about his family and his kids and, the different things where his kids are living at and stuff now. And then he said he's looking for a new home and they're going to do this and that. And we talked about some hunting stuff. So we talked for about 20, 25 minutes as I drove, and, very little about that was about hockey, really. It was just about, life and stuff like that. And so, I've obviously got, high esteem for, Mike Babcock, and despite things you read in the press and stuff negative about him, he's an incredible guy. And, he's done some amazing things for the Humboldt Broncos and some of those families and stuff that, I'll never forget. And I'm so thankful for him for doing that stuff.
Wow, that's a great Mike Babcock story. That is like, I don't think anybody else will have that kind of Mike Babcock story.
Well, it's kind of different. I mean, it's unique, but what I found, guys, is that, as I get involved, and when I first kind of got into scouting, and there was one guy that's an old Frankie Kohler. He's based out of Minneapolis. He's been a scout. He was a scout for Vancouver for a lot of years, and then he was with Ottawa for a couple of years. And Frankie's an old Slovakian guy. He still hardly speaks English and stuff like that. He would always lead up the Slovakian teams when they come to the U.S. He'd kind of be their, escort and mediator with all the different teams and stuff like that. So, one day we were talking, I think we were in Minneapolis scouting a tournament or something. And I kind of asked Frankie about NHL scouting because, that's something I've always aspired to do maybe, is maybe someday try and get into the NHL as a scout. And so I was talking to Frankie about his experience and how did he get in and stuff. And he said, you got to start reaching out to guys and stuff like that. And he said, I'll share some numbers from my Rolodex type thing that people that you can maybe reach out from different teams and stuff that I know and stuff. And so Frankie was nice enough to do that. So finally, a couple of years ago, I thought, well, reach out to a couple of these guys. So I look at his list and he's kind of going, 90% of the names I don't even recognize on there because they're just the director of scouting that I never heard or something. But out pops at me is Scotty Bowman is one of the guys on the list. And so as I go, if you're going to swing at a ball, why not try to hit a home run, right? I'm going to reach out to Scotty Bowman, right? And so I emailed Scotty Bowman, and it wasn't 2 hours later, I had a reply from Scotty Bowman. So I always tell people, who's your most famous person in your inbox and stuff? Well, I can say Scotty Bowman's in my inbox and stuff. And he's just so kind, so legendary guys. Like, I mean, how many Stanley Cups he's won, Hall of Famer. And he takes the time to reply to me and basically get copied, like whoever the head of their HR department said, hey, make sure to look after Wayne here, his resume type thing and stuff like that. And thanks a lot. Well, I think it's just legendary that this guy takes the time to do that in such a short time. So it was a real eye opener to me that, why reach out to the little guy when, in hockey, it seems like the big guys, if you're, polite and not pushy, 9 times out of 10, these guys will respond to you in some way. And so, I've kind of taken that attitude and, it's led me to, have conversations with some people that range from, Peter Chiarelli to Kevin Constantine, Mark Recchi, various guys that are coaching in NHL and stuff, and stuff like that. And, it's a small world. And I mean, out of that now, I mean, I've had calls from NHL coaches to help them, and not from coaching NHL, but it's more so from players that they know that are wanting to go USHL and stuff. And it's not their kids or anything, but it's like people call them and they say, I don't know nothing about the USHL or the WHL. I mean, so it's flattering to me to get a call from an NHL coach and said, I've heard that you do got a lot of good things and maybe you can help these guys out. And so, make some of those connections and stuff. And who knows where that goes someday. But like I say, at the end of the day, some of these guys, I mean, they're just guys like you and I. They put their pants on one leg at a time type thing and stuff. And we all like beer type thing and stuff and laughing. And so they're the same as us as you get down to it. And, I think if you're just respectful and kind and, I think, they're great people to you. And, quite honestly, it's taught me that, I mean, I make a lot of calls to, junior A coaches and scouts and all that stuff. And my experience is sometimes the lower down the ladder the guy is, the less likely he's going to call me back. And it's kind of eye-opening. I mean, it's like, I return everybody's call. I mean, that's just a rule. And now after, dealing with the likes of these NHL legends, I mean, that's, I think why those guys got to be where they are is because they're people persons and they return everybody's call. And so they're obviously detailed people, they're hard workers. And I think that's why they got to where they are. People that maybe say, I'm not going to return this guy. Like, who's Matt Barrett? Like, why would I return him? I mean, I don't think that's a good thing. No slight on you, Matt. Your name was just top of mind. I could have said Jake Woods or something.
Exactly.
But, I've really taken that as a learning that, I get emails and texts from players. And now that I'm, dealing with people in Europe and stuff, and I always respond in a timely manner. And even if it's just to say I can't help them out, but pass on a name or something like that, and people are so appreciative. And I think it's just a good character trait to have. Well,
Wayne, we're kind of like a great way to end this thing. I mean, thank you so much for taking some time to hang out with us. This was a lot of fun. I always enjoy chatting with you about hockey because the stories are endless between us. We could go on for hours. But thank you for coming on and hanging out with us. This was great.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jake. And let's do it another time soon. I still have a few more stories in the bag, and hopefully I'll create a few more ones that'll happen here over the next few months. So appreciate you having me on here and love to be on again sometime too and chat some more and hear some of your guys' stories too.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Stay safe. Cheers.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Cheers. Have a good evening. Chat soon.